Hello everyone, welcome to Starung. Today we are going to start with the history of grade ninth. So till now from grade 6 to 8 what we studied was about Indian history, the history of our own country. But from now in grade ninth we'll focus upon world history. So the first chapter we have in our grade is the French Revolution. It's about the country France in Europe. On the first page, we here see the account of an incident that took place on 14th of July 1789 in the city of Paris. Paris is the capital city of France. So it here says that king had commanded troops to move into the city. So he had ordered them to fire upon the citizens. That was the rumor that had spread in Paris. And as a result, as a consequence of that rumor, 7,000 men and women they had gathered in front of the town hall and decided to form a people's militia. Militia here refers to the group that they had formed or were planning to form in order to fight against the decision taken by the king. They broke into a number of government buildings in order to stood against the king, and finally, a group of them they marched towards the eastern part of the city. They moved there and they stormed the fortress prison Bastille. Bastille was a fortress prison where they hoped to find hoarded ammunition which would help them in their revolt against the king. So, in the armed fight that followed, the commander of the Bastille was killed and the prisoners were released. To notice, in Bastille, there were only seven prisoners which were present, yet it was hated by all because it stood for the despotic power of the king. The fortress was demolished and its stone fragments were sold in the markets. They destructed it completely and sold its fragments, which were kept by people as a souvenir of its destruction and souvenir of the destruction of the monarchy. And the days that followed saw so many such riots that took place in Paris and in the countryside. So, um, this was somewhere the beginning of the French Revolution. But to know why did it occur, we'll have to move further. And here starts the first unit of our chapter, French society during the late 18th century. So in 1774, France was ruled by Louis XVI of the Bourbon dynasty. He ascended the throne in 1774 when he was just of the age 20, newly married to the Austrian princess Marie Antoinette. When he ascended the throne, he found that the treasury was empty. And as he was too young, it was hard for him to find for a solution to the situation. Actually, the treasury was empty because of various reasons. If we look into it, long years of war and the cost of maintaining an extravagant court are the two main reasons for this. As, as it is written here, that long years of war had drained the financial resources of France, and the cost of maintaining an extravagant court at the immense palace of Versailles. Under Louis XVI, France had also helped 13 American colonies to gain their independence from Britain, which was not only the enemy of Americans but for France too. So these all the wars that occurred, they added more than a billion livres to a debt that had already taken risen to more than 2 billion livres. So if we once again look into the reasons that we can count for the empty treasury, then we have long years of war and the cost of maintaining an extravagant court and France helping American colonies to gain their independence from Britain, and the debt that has risen from a billion livres to 2 billion livres. And also, the lenders who have given the state credit now begin to charge 10% interest on loans. All these situations made Leo 16 uh, made to think like how he was going to rule over the country with the empty treasury and all this pressure upon him. So he was obliged to spend an increased percentage of his budget on interest payments, but to meet his regular expenses and the cost of maintaining an army, the court, and running government offices, he was required and was forced to increase taxes. But if we look into how the French society was in 18th century, we will find that even the step of increasing taxes would not have sufficed, because in the French society in the 18th century, only the members of the third estate, which included small peasants, landless laborers, artisans, and merchants, lawyers, only they used to pay taxes. For this, let us look into the formation or the division of the French society into the three states, that is, clergy, nobility, and the third state, which includes several social artists, businessmen, peasants, so clergies. If we look into the first estate, clergies were mainly the people who used to work in church and who were like uh, like made or like they were known to be the society which was most close to God. And nobility were the relatives or the people who were near to kings, whereas the people of the third estate, some of them were educated, but most of them were peasants, workers who used to work for nobles and clergies. So it was a part of the feudal system. Feudal system is when we have division. So feudal system that dated back to the Middle Ages. So here we can conclude that French society, it was a part of the feudal system, and there were three estates: clergy, nobility, and the third estate, which included people who worked for nobles and clergies. The term old regime is usually used to describe the society and institutions of France before 1789. So, this reign of 1774, when Louis XVI was ruling, is termed as old regime. So, as we looked into the Society of Estates in France, to know more about it, it is that system of estates in French society was organized, and peasants um, were more in number. They were about 90% of the population was peasants, and only a small number of them owned the land they cultivated. So, as I mentioned, that they used to work for nobles and clergy, so the land on which they used to work was mainly owned by them, like nobles and clergies, but that did not belong to the peasants. About 60% of the land was owned by nobles, church, and other richer members of the third estate. Members of the first two estates, that is clergy and nobility, enjoyed certain privileges by birth. So, like as I told you, that they were like clergies were made think of like they were seemed to be near to God, and nobles were near to the kings. So they enjoyed certain privileges by birth, like they didn't have to pay taxes, and even they enjoyed certain feudal privileges, which is like they were given privileges in certain other criterias, and they included feudal dues, like peasants and workers, whatever they produced, a percentage of that was paid to nobles and clergies. And peasants were also obliged to render services to the nobles and clergies. They didn't just have to work in their fields, but if the nobles demanded, then peasants would have to work in their homes as well, and they were pressurized to take part in army and building roads. So this was the separation which was done in French society, where people were divided into three different estates, and where the first two estates, they enjoyed several privileges, whereas the third and the people of the third estates, they had to suffer. The church, it too extracted its share of taxes called teats from the peasants, and all members of the third estate had to pay taxes to the state. So we find that whereas the first and the second estate, the people there, they didn't had to suffer, they didn't have to pay any taxes, whereas the members of the third estate, they had to pay several taxes, like in several indirect taxes as well as direct taxes. And if we count for the indirect taxes, they had to pay it to the church, which is called as teeth. They had to pay services to the nobles, they had to give their share to the kings, and the members of the third estate also had to pay a direct tax which is called tally, and which a number of indirect taxes were levied on articles of everyday consumption, which were made compulsory to be paid by them, like articles like salt or tobacco. And these all this burden of financing activities of the state was thus borne by the third estate alone, as the first and the second estate had to pay no tax. Only the third estate was the one which was responsible for the functioning of the country. We can see here a picture in which a peasant is paying a part of his, or say most of the percentage of his production in the field to the nobles. The noble is here is described as the the spider and the peasant as the fly. The struggle to strike. So you see, we are moving forward to find out the cause of the incident that took place in July in 1789 in Paris. So the first thing we find is that somewhere or the other, the third state, because of his suffering, was in quite rage, which it somewhere or the other it was not showcasing, but it had to suffer. And let's see what are the or are the further causes which led to which gave the fire to their rage. So they struggled to strike. The population of France, it rose from 23 million in 1715 to 28 million in 1789. Before I start to describe it, I would like to say that this, which we are going to study further, is about how the people of France, they were struggling to even survive. As we know, they had to pay several taxes, and um, like the first point we read here is that the population rose. So when the population rose and they had to pay several taxes, the price of bread rose. All these circumstances led to that struggle. So, like the first point has, we have the population of France rose from about 23 million in 1715 to 28 million in 1789. The rise of 5 million in population. So this led to a rapid increase in the demand for food grains, and production of food grains could not keep pace with the demand. So the price of bread, which was the staple diet of the majority, rose rapidly. So to conclude here, the population rose, and as a consequence, there was a rapid increase in the demand, but the production, it did not increase. So the production could not keep pace with the demand. So till now, we have that population is on rise, but and demand is on rise. So, but as we can, the second point is that production did not increase. So the price of bread, which was the staple diet of the majority, it rose rapidly. So most workers, the second situation we have here is that most of the workers were employed as laborers in workshops which was owned by um, owners, and they had actually fixed their wages. So at this time when we see that population was on rise and demand was on rise, price of bread has rose rapidly, what the workers demanded was to have an increase in their wages as well. But as the owners had already fixed their wages, they did not make any changes. So now the wages did not keep pace with rise in price. As a result, the gap between the poor and the rich widened. This led to a very worse situation, and whenever a drought or a hail occurred, the situation was uncontrollable, and this is what we term as subsistence crisis. What we understand by the term subsistence, subsistence is to live, and crisis is when something is endangered, when we can't fulfill something. So subsistence crisis means an extreme situation where the basic means of livelihood are endangered. In simple language, when we can't fulfill our basic needs to sustain our life, that is called a subsistence crisis. And here it is written that something that occurred frequently in France during the old regime. Why so? Because the king was Louis XVI, who was very young. He became king at the age of 20, and the treasury was empty. What was done? Taxes were levied on people of third estate, and they were somewhere already in the pressure of paying taxes, several direct and indirect taxes. And when there was population on rise, demand was on rise, and the prices of bread rose, and their wages did not increase, production did not increase. There was a gap between poor and rich, and there was an anger between the people of third estate. This is a chart which we can fulfill. And like, there was bad harvest, and the poorest can no longer buy bread. Disease epidemics, if you guys go through what I have taught you for the before, you can easily fill it. And if you find any problem, you can surely uh, paste it in the comment box. So to moving on further, a growing middle class envisages an end to privileges. Middle class. This was a society which emerged in France during this time. Like, it stood there before, but uh, the work that it did was shown at this moment. So in the past, peasant and workers, they had participated in revolts against increasing taxes and food scarcity. Like, of course, when they did not had food to eat, when they could not pay their taxes, and they were uh, forced by nobles, clergy, they would have led several revolts, but they lacked the means and programs to carry out full scale measures to bring that change in society, in social, economic, and political order. And this was the thing which was left to middle class, because middle class, they were prosperous, they were educated, and they were exposed to new ideas. If we see, in 18th century, emergence of new social groups occurred, and one of them was the middle class. Middle class, they had already earned their wealth through an expanded overseas trade, like the manufacture of goods such as woolen and silk textiles. And these goods were either exported or bought by the richer members of society, so they earned benefits from there. And some of them, they were merchants and manufacturers, and some were lawyers, administrative officials, so they were educated and they were prosperous. All of these educated members and prosperous members, they believed, as as we all know, that when once we are successful, we know what is right, what is wrong. We don't uh, uh, we don't want anyone to be superior from us. Superior in the sense, we can't be just adjusted in the way society wants us to be. We all want to give our own views and want people to at least focus upon them. So the same the case was there. The people, when they were prosperous, they were educated, and they knew what is right, what is wrong, what is to be done. They didn't want any society to be privileged by birth. They wanted that society, social groups, they should be given privileges according to their abilities, their merits, not the birth or their not the according to the families which they belonged. Because if it continued, the members who were going to rule were only from the first and second state. The members of the third state will never get recognition. So such ideas on based on freedom and equal laws, opportunities for all, they were put forward by the members of the members of the middle class. And uh, we name them as philosophers, such as, so there are certain philosophers which we are going to name. They wrote several books and made several philosophies which were somewhere or the other based on the freedom, equal laws, opportunities, all these social issues. So one of the philosophers we have is John Locke. In his book, Two Treatises of Government, he sought to refute the doctrine of the divine and absolute right of the monarch. Doctrine of the divine here means कि the king he is a follower of the God, which is sent by God on earth to rule on his behalf. An absolute right of the monarch is much similar. It means that whatever monarch does is right. So, what Locke did, he in his book, The True Treatise of Government, he stood against this idea and he just wanted to enlighten people about that the king is also a human being and it is we who is following us. God has not made him his follower to be on the earth. There's nothing such thing. So one more philosopher we have is Jean Jacques Rousseau. He carried the idea forward, proposing the form of government based on a social contract between people and their representatives. So, actually, what he said was much similar to what we are following in India today. Like he said that when the king he is going to rule over the people of the country, then why not to have the rulers as set as the representatives of the people? Because if we have so, we have a social contract between the people and the representatives, the government will work much well and they'll be able to work for the welfare of the people. And the next philosopher we have is Montesquieu. He proposed a division of power within the government. In his book, The Spirit of the Laws, he said that there should be a division of the power between the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. If we focus, then this model we are also following in India to have legislative powers, executive, and the judiciary. By this form of government, somewhere and the other, uh, the king is made accountable to the people of the country, and it is made sure that he don't misuse his powers. So, the model of the government was put into force in the USA after the 13 colonies they declared their independence from Britain. The American Constitution and its guarantee of individual rights was an important example for political thinkers in France. The ideas of these philosophers were discussed intensively in salons and coffee houses and spread among people through books and newspapers. This here expresses that people of France were keen to make a change in their country, and that's why they were discussing all which was going on in America or different European countries. So, even the ideas of the philosophers they were read aloud in groups for the people who could not read or write for the people who were illiterate. And this is where the news that Louis XVI was planning to impose further taxes on the people of third estate was spread, and this news generated an anger and protest against the system of privileges. Here we are given an account of Georges Denton, who later became an revolutionary politics. How did he? What are the challenges he faced, and in the old regime about his experience of the old regime. So you can read it. You can once go through it, and if you find any problem, just post it in the comment box. And we will start from the second unit in the next class. Hope you liked it. Thank you so much.